Imagine walking into a grocery store one evening. The fluorescent lights buzz faintly above, casting that washed-out glow every shopper knows. The sound of squeaky carts echoes down the aisles. The steady rhythm of checkout scanners, beep, 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 creates a background beat, almost hypnotic. On the surface, it's ordinary. It feels safe. But here's the thing, in this particular store, buried under all that routine, is a secret. A secret so chilling and so unexplainable that even hardened investigators, years later, would shake their heads and admit, it made no sense. Because on one otherwise unremarkable night, a young grocery clerk, a woman just like any you've seen bagging your groceries or stocking your shelves, started her shift like normal, and then, she never came home. No goodbye, no explanation. One minute she was there. The next, she was gone. And what makes this story terrifying isn't just that she disappeared, it's how. The details, the timing, the clues left behind, and the things caught, or not caught, on camera. All of it paints a picture that's deeply unsettling. And when you hear it, you'll realize this isn't just a missing persons case. This is something stranger. Warning before I go any further, if you're the kind of person who gets pulled into mysteries, who wants to know every detail, every strange twist, and every unanswered question, this story is for you. But it's not the only one. I tell stories like this every single day. So if you want to go deeper into the world of true crime, unexplained disappearances, and mysteries that leave you awake at night, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Because the story you're about to hear will have you looking twice the next time you step into your neighborhood grocery store. A small town routine. Our story takes place in a modest American town. It's not a big city with endless skyscrapers, nor a rural ghost town, it's somewhere in between. A place where people know each other by name, where the cashier asks about your family, and where the grocery store isn't just a store, it's the heartbeat of the community. This store had been around for decades. Parents brought their kids here, kids grew up and brought their own families here. In a town where entertainment options were limited, grocery shopping wasn't just about food, it was about connection. And behind the counters, stocking the shelves, bagging the produce, were employees everyone recognized. One of them was Hannah. At just 22 years old, Hannah was already beloved by both customers and coworkers. She was that dependable, cheerful person you always saw smiling in aisle 3 or 4. She had big dreams, she was saving up for college, planning to study nursing. But until then, she worked long hours at the store, never missing a shift, never late. Friends said she had a laugh that carried, and a heart that made people feel at ease. Coworkers said if you needed help, she was there. She wasn't just another employee, she was the kind of person people remembered. And that's what made what happened to her all the more haunting. The night it happened. It was a Thursday evening. The store was steady, not too busy but not quiet either. People picking up groceries after work, kids tugging on carts begging for candy, couples debating brands of pasta sauce. The clock ticked just past 5 p.m. when Hannah walked into the store. Security cameras caught her arrival. She was in her green store polo shirt, her hair tied back neatly. She clocked in at 5:02 p.m., precisely on time. Her shift assignment was routine: restock shelves in the canned goods aisle, then rotate to a checkout register later in the evening. Nothing about the night seemed out of the ordinary. By 7:15 p.m., coworkers saw her chatting briefly with an older woman she often helped. Witnesses said she seemed cheerful, laughing as she pushed her cart of restocking supplies toward aisle 4. That was the last confirmed sighting of Hannah. The first sign something was wrong. At first, nobody thought much of her absence. Stores are hectic. Employees move constantly, to the stockroom, to the back office, to break rooms. A missing face for a half hour isn't alarming. But by 8 p.m., her supervisor realized Hannah hadn't checked in. He assumed she was still stocking. By 8:30 p.m., when she still hadn't returned, he went looking. What he found stopped him cold. In aisle 4 sat Hannah's cart, half filled with canned goods. A box of soup cans sat open inside, some stacked neatly on the shelf. but the work looked unfinished, almost as if she'd walked away in the middle of it. One can had rolled onto the floor. But there was no Hannah. He checked the stockroom, empty. He checked the break room, her jacket was still hanging in her locker, her purse untouched, her phone sitting inside, charging. Everything she owned was still there. It was as if she'd just evaporated. The investigation begins. By 10 p.m., when Hannah hadn't clocked out, her manager knew something was terribly wrong. He tried calling her cell, no answer. He called her family, they hadn't seen or heard from her. Finally, at 10:30, he called the police. Investigators arrived quickly. Their first move, pull the surveillance footage. From 5:02 p.m. until 7:20 p.m., the cameras told a clear story, Hannah working, moving from aisle to aisle, chatting with customers. But then, nothing. No footage of her leaving through the front doors. No footage of her slipping out the employee exit. No footage of her in the parking lot. No footage of her anywhere past 7:20. It was like someone had cut her out of the video. The thing was, this store didn't have large blind spots. Cameras overlapped. Investigators spent hours rewatching frame by frame. But Hannah never reappeared. Strange details emerge. What's worse were the details. Customers in the store around that time later reported odd things. Several said they heard a loud metallic clang from the back, like something falling hard in the stockroom. The lights flickered for a split second, too. No one connected it then. But afterward, it stood out. Another customer swore she saw Hannah walking past aisle 7, but when she turned seconds later, she was gone. And then there was that can on the floor near Hannah's cart. When investigators rewound the footage to catch the moment it fell, the can just rolled off the shelf. No one touched it. It was eerie. Almost staged. The aftermath. By the next morning, word spread like wildfire. A grocery clerk, missing, in the middle of her shift, inside the store itself. News crews lined up in the parking lot. Customers brought flowers, leaving them at the entrance. Hannah's co-workers sobbed, refusing to believe it. Her family was inconsolable. Her mother told reporters she would never just leave. She had her whole life ahead of her. Someone took her. Search teams scoured the woods behind the store. They searched dumpsters, drains, even the rooftops. Nothing. Not a single clue. The story became the talk of the town. People whispered about what had happened, each theory darker than the last. Theories began to form. Some believed it was a kidnapping, that someone had lured her into a blind spot and forced her out. But how, with cameras everywhere? Others thought maybe Hannah had staged her disappearance. But her bank account was untouched, her social media silent, her phone still in her locker. She had no reason to run. And then came the whispers about the grocery store itself. Because, disturbingly, Hannah wasn't the first person connected to that store who had gone missing. And when police began digging into its past, they uncovered something that made Hannah's case even more chilling. The store's secret past. When Hannah vanished, her family and community clung desperately to hope. Maybe she was lost, maybe she'd call, maybe there was a simple explanation. But as investigators dug deeper into the case, what they uncovered shifted the entire story from a simple missing persons case to something much darker. Because Hannah's disappearance wasn't the first mystery tied to that grocery store. And once detectives started unraveling its history, they realized this place had been hiding secrets for decades. The police expand the search. After combing through the security footage, officers knew they were missing something. If Hannah didn't leave through the front doors, or the employee exit, or the parking lot, then where did she go? Detectives widened their search beyond the usual. They pulled old incident reports tied to the store. They asked longtime employees and locals if anything unusual had happened there before. And the answers were disturbing. The forgotten disappearance. 15 years earlier, in the late 2000s, another young woman had vanished in connection to the same store. Her name was Rachel, a 19-year-old part-time employee who worked night shifts. Rachel's case had been chalked up as a runaway. She didn't come home from her shift one night. Her locker still had her belongings. Police at the time believed she left willingly, perhaps running away to start a new life. But her parents swore otherwise. She had no money, no car, and no plan. Her case went cold. But now, with Hannah gone in eerily similar circumstances, investigators started to wonder, was Rachel's disappearance really a runaway? Or was it the beginning of a disturbing pattern? Strange incidents inside the store. As police dug through records, they found something else: incident reports filed by employees and customers over the years. 2009, a customer claimed she lost track of time inside the store. She swore she entered around 7 p.m., but when she walked out, it was nearly 10 o'clock, and she couldn't explain where the hours had gone. 2013, an employee quit after claiming she heard voices whispering her name while she stocked shelves late at night. When she turned around, no one was there. 2017, a delivery driver swore he saw someone standing in the locked stockroom after hours. But when staff opened it, the room was empty. Individually, these stories sounded like paranoia or exaggeration. But stacked together, they painted a chilling picture. Something about this store wasn't right. The building's history. The deeper investigators dug, the stranger it got. The grocery store itself wasn't new. It had been built in the 1970s. But the land it sat on had a long, complicated history. Locals remembered that before the store, there had been a small factory there. And before that, fields. But hidden in town archives was a detail that made detectives pause. In the early 1900s, that exact plot of land was the site of a small asylum. A facility for the mentally ill, poorly funded, poorly staffed, and plagued with neglect. Records showed that several patients had died there under suspicious circumstances. The asylum eventually burned down in a fire, but rumors lingered. Locals claimed they still heard screams at night from the fields long after the building was gone. When the grocery store was later built on the same spot, old-timers shook their heads and said, "That place is cursed." Most people dismissed it as superstition. Until now. The surveillance oddities. Police returned to the surveillance footage again, but this time, instead of just looking for Hannah, they analyzed everything: the lighting, the timestamps, the background. And that's when they noticed something chilling. At 7:18 p.m., 2 minutes before Hannah was last seen, one of the cameras in aisle 4 glitched. For exactly 3 seconds, the feed went dark. When it came back online, Hannah was pushing her cart. At 7:20 p.m., the feed glitched again. This time, when the camera returned, Hannah was gone. There was no sign of her walking away. No blur. No shadow. Nothing. She was there. Then she wasn't. Investigators had no technical explanation for this. The store's IT team claimed the cameras had never behaved that way before. Employee testimonies. Detectives began re-interviewing Hannah's co-workers. And what they learned only deepened the mystery. One stock boy, who had been working in the frozen foods section around the same time, admitted he thought he saw Hannah walking past. But when he turned to greet her, she wasn't there. Another employee said she felt a sudden rush of cold air in aisle 4, so cold it made her shiver. But the air conditioning wasn't running. And one more, the night janitor, shared something he had kept to himself at first. He said he found a faint set of wet footprints near the employee-only door leading to the stockroom. But here's the strange part: they didn't lead anywhere. They just stopped, as though the person who made them had vanished mid-step. The family's desperation. Meanwhile, Hannah's family was breaking down. Her younger brother begged police to keep searching. Her mother couldn't sleep. Her father was furious at the lack of answers. The family organized vigils, put up flyers, begged the media to keep her story alive. They refused to believe she had walked away. One local reporter asked her mother, "Do you think she's still alive?" Her mother's reply was chilling. "I don't know. But I do know this: whatever took her, it's not something we've dealt with before." The public theories. As word of the store's strange history spread, theories multiplied. Some insisted it was a stalker. Maybe someone obsessed with Hannah found a way to lure her out, unseen. Others believed it was an inside job. Maybe a coworker had something to do with it. And then there were the whispers. People in town claimed the store itself was haunted. That it was cursed ground. That Hannah had been swallowed by the building the same way Rachel had, years earlier. And while most dismissed the paranormal talk, others couldn't ignore the growing stack of bizarre coincidences. The police hit a wall. Weeks passed. Despite interviews, footage, and searches, no concrete evidence surfaced. Hannah was gone. The FBI was briefly consulted, but without proof of abduction or foul play, the case stalled. All they had were strange glitches, eerie testimonies, and a history of unexplained disappearances. But then, just as the investigation was about to lose momentum, detectives discovered something in the store's basement. Something that had been hidden for decades. And what they found would change the entire direction of the case. The basement discovery. For weeks, police had combed through every inch of the grocery store, aisles, stockroom, parking lot, even dumpsters. But no matter how many times they searched, no physical evidence tied to Hannah ever surfaced. And then, one night, during what was supposed to be a routine re-examination of the property, a detective noticed something odd about the store's layout. The blueprints they had on file, official construction records from the 1970s, didn't quite match the actual floor plan of the building. There was an extra wall. Or, more precisely, there was space behind a wall that shouldn't have been there. That's when investigators decided to break open part of the basement. And what they found hidden down there, behind decades of drywall and dust, took this case from eerie to terrifying. The hidden room. The basement of the grocery store wasn't large, just a maintenance space with water pipes and breaker panels. But when police pushed past the sealed section, they uncovered a hidden doorway. Behind it was a narrow, dimly lit corridor, coated in dust and spiderwebs. At the end of that corridor, a small, windowless room. It looked like no one had entered in years. Inside, the air was stale. The walls were concrete, cracked, stained by age. In the center of the room sat a single wooden chair, rusted metal restraints bolted to its arms. The sight made every officer's stomach drop. The evidence inside. The room wasn't empty. On the floor were old, yellowed newspapers, brittle from time. Headlines about missing persons from decades earlier. Scribbles in the margins, unreadable, frantic handwriting. There was also a small, leather-bound notebook tucked behind the chair. Its pages were filled with notes, strange sketches of faces, lists of names, and ramblings about the ones who stay in the walls. But the most disturbing detail? Carved into the concrete wall was a name. Scratched in jagged, uneven letters. Rachel. The same name as the 19-year-old employee who had disappeared from the store 15 years earlier. Connecting the dots. Detectives were shaken. They now had a direct link between the earlier disappearance and Hannah's case. But the discovery only raised more questions. Who created this hidden room? Why had no one known about it before? And most chilling of all, was Hannah ever down here? Forensic teams swept the space for DNA, fingerprints, anything. They found partial prints on the notebook, but they were too degraded to match. Still, the discovery reignited the investigation and renewed the family's hope that Hannah's case might finally be solvable. The store's management reacts. When investigators confronted the store's management with the basement discovery, their reaction was defensive. They insisted the room predated their ownership. They claimed they had no idea it even existed. They reminded police that the land's history included the old asylum, suggesting maybe the space was a relic of that time. But workers weren't so sure. Some admitted they had always felt something strange in the basement. A few even confessed they avoided it at all costs, describing feelings of being watched, of hearing faint whispers when they were alone. The family's pain deepens. For Hannah's family, the news was both devastating and confusing. On one hand, It confirmed their worst fears. Someone had hidden a torture-like chamber in the very place their daughter worked. On the other hand, there was still no trace of Hannah herself. No clothing. No hair. No DNA. Her mother, in tears, told reporters. Finding that room, it's like being shown the monster, but never knowing what it did with your child. The paranormal angle grows. While police leaned toward a criminal explanation, the public began spinning paranormal theories. Some believed the hidden room wasn't used by a person at all, but was a thin place, where the veil between worlds was weaker. They argued Hannah hadn't been kidnapped, she had been pulled into whatever force haunted the building since the asylum days. Others tied the glitching cameras to this theory, pointing out that the exact moment Hannah vanished coincided with the camera's blackout. Skeptics laughed it off. But believers insisted Hannah hadn't left the store. She had been taken by it. The notebook's ramblings. The leather notebook from the hidden room became the centerpiece of speculation. Analysts pored over its messy handwriting, trying to make sense of it. Some entries were chillingly specific. The girl in green, aisle 4. Voices say she belongs now. Rachel doesn't leave. Rachel stays. But others were incoherent, spiraling phrases about walls that breathe and the ones who slip through. Police refused to confirm the notebook's details to the public, but whispers leaked. And once they did, the case exploded online. The store's legacy of fear. By now, the grocery store had become infamous. Customers avoided it. Workers quit in droves. The building gained a reputation as cursed. Parents told their kids not to go near it. People in town claimed they saw figures in the windows after closing. One driver swore he passed by at night and saw someone standing in the lock store, watching from the dark. The company tried damage control, but the stigma stuck. The store wasn't just a store anymore. It was the place where people vanish. The police's dilemma. For detectives, the case was maddening. They had 2 women who disappeared from the same store, years apart. A hidden basement chamber with disturbing clues. Glitching surveillance footage. Dozens of strange employee testimonies. And yet, they still had no body, no suspect, and no definitive crime. The official line was, Hannah is missing under suspicious circumstances. But off the record, detectives admitted this was the strangest case they had ever seen. A breakthrough witness. Just as the case seemed ready to stall again, a new witness stepped forward. It was a former employee, a man who had worked at the store briefly in the late 2000s. He had quit after only a few weeks. Why? Because one night, while closing up, he heard someone crying in the basement. A woman's voice. Soft, desperate. When he went down to check, the crying stopped. The basement was empty. But he swore he saw a shadow move across the wall, where no one was standing. Shaken, he never returned. And when police showed him a photo of Hannah, he nodded slowly and said, "That's the voice. That's who I heard." The investigation's new focus. The basement discovery changed everything. Police now treated the grocery store itself as the primary crime scene. They brought in ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath the building. They began re-questioning former owners, contractors, even the descendants of those tied to the asylum. But what they were about to uncover next would make the basement chair and notebook look tame. Because beneath the foundation of that grocery store was something no one had ever expected to find. The break that wasn't. For weeks, the grocery store became less of a supermarket and more of a crime scene. Customers still came in, shelves were still stocked, and carts still rolled down the aisles, but the air inside felt heavier, haunted. People whispered near the produce section, avoiding aisle 3 entirely, as if walking down it might draw them into whatever force had swallowed the young clerk. Investigators worked day and night, following the same path she'd taken again and again, trying desperately to find the piece of evidence they had missed. And just when hope was beginning to fade, a new lead emerged, one that, for a brief moment, seemed like it could solve everything. The anonymous tip. Late one evening, the police department received a call. The voice on the other end was muffled, distorted, like someone speaking through fabric. The caller claimed they had information about the missing clerk. They didn't say their name, and they didn't explain how they knew what they knew. All they offered was a cryptic statement. She didn't leave the store. She's still there. The line went dead before officers could trace the call. At first, investigators dismissed it as a cruel prank. Anonymous tips were common in high-profile cases, and most of the time, they led nowhere. But the wording, the chilling certainty of it, forced detectives to reconsider. Could it be true? Could she really still be inside that store somehow? A second search. Acting on the tip, the police launched another full-scale search of the supermarket. Every room, every corner, every hidden closet was checked. They even brought in cadaver dogs, expecting them to hit on some clue, a scent, a trace, something. But again, nothing. No signs of struggle, no hidden passages, no blood, no trace at all. It was as though the store had swallowed her whole and then sealed itself shut. And yet, the dogs did something strange. At one point, near the back storage area, the same place where her badge and apron had been found, two of the dogs stopped. They didn't bark, they didn't dig. They just froze, staring at a blank section of wall, whining softly. The handlers tried to redirect them, but the animals wouldn't budge. To them, there was something there. To the humans, it was just concrete and paint. A lead that evaporates. The wall was scanned, tapped, and even drilled into. It was solid. No cavities, no crawl spaces, nothing hidden behind it. Yet the memory of those dogs refusing to move stayed with investigators, gnawing at their minds like a riddle they couldn't solve. As quickly as it had come, the promising lead dissolved into another dead end. The breaking point. For the clerk's family, the roller coaster of hope and despair was unbearable. One moment, they believed an answer was within reach. The next, they were back to square one, staring into a void of uncertainty. Her mother, exhausted and trembling, told reporters, "It's worse than death. If she had died, at least I could grieve. But this is like she's trapped somewhere between worlds, and I can't reach her." Her words struck a chord, not just with investigators but with the public. This wasn't just a disappearance anymore. It was something darker, stranger, and it was becoming harder to explain with logic alone. The store's reputation. Meanwhile, the grocery store was falling apart. Customers avoided it. Employees quit in droves, saying they couldn't shake the feeling that the building itself was wrong. Some claimed they heard footsteps when they were alone. Others swore the security cameras would glitch whenever they passed through aisle 3, freezing on distorted images that didn't match reality. By now, the case had stopped being about just one missing clerk. It had become a story about a place, a store that seemed cursed, as if it had swallowed a secret no one was supposed to find. And just when it seemed like investigators had hit the final wall, literally and figuratively, a discovery was made that would send this case spiraling into even darker territory. The disturbing discovery. Weeks had bled into months, and the mystery of the missing grocery clerk was starting to slip from headlines. Other tragedies had taken the spotlight. New crimes, new scandals, new disasters. But for the family, the pain was constant, unrelenting. Every day, her mother called her phone, and every day, the line went straight to voicemail. Her father sat in silence at the dinner table, staring at the empty chair across from him. Her younger brother stopped bringing friends home, embarrassed by the quiet sobs that seemed to echo through their house at night. The world was moving on. But they couldn't. And then, just when it seemed like hope had finally run dry, a discovery was made inside the very place she vanished. The storage room secret. The grocery store had been struggling for months. Customers were boycotting, employees kept quitting, and the building had taken on the reputation of being haunted. Finally, the store's corporate owners made a decision: they would shut it down permanently. Before locking the doors for the last time, they sent in a small crew to clear out the remaining stock. Boxes were stacked, shelves emptied, and freezers unplugged. It was supposed to be just another mundane day of cleanup. But in the back, in the storage area, one of the workers made a discovery that would reignite the entire case. Behind a row of heavy shelving units, ones that hadn't been moved in years, they found a narrow gap in the wall. It wasn't a full passageway, just a small opening, maybe wide enough for someone to squeeze through. It was dark, damp, and led into what looked like an unfinished section of the building that no one even knew existed. Inside, they found a collection of strange items. The forgotten room. Dust-covered soda cans. Wrappers from snack foods that had long expired. A torn piece of fabric that, when shown to the family, was immediately recognized. It matched the shirt the clerk had been wearing the night she vanished. But the strangest thing of all wasn't the trash, or the fabric, or even the unsettling realization that someone had clearly been in that space recently. It was what was drawn on the walls. Covering the cracked concrete, in thick black marker, were dozens of words. Scribbled over and over again, repeating the same phrase. "Don't look in aisle 3. The reaction. When police were called back in to investigate, they treated the discovery like the first real lead in months. Forensic teams swarmed the forgotten space. They dusted for fingerprints, tested the food wrappers for DNA, and cataloged every single mark on the walls. The family clung to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this was where she had been taken. That maybe she had been alive long enough to leave those signs behind. But the results only raised more questions. The food wrappers tested negative for her DNA. The handwriting on the walls didn't match hers. The piece of fabric? Yes, it belonged to her shirt. But the shirt itself was never found. The investigators were left staring at a half-answer, a breadcrumb trail that led into nothing but darkness. The media storm. When news of the discovery broke, the public fascination with the case reignited. Headlines screamed about the haunted grocery store, and conspiracy theories flooded the internet. Some believed she had been abducted and held in that space before being moved somewhere else. Others suggested she had stumbled into the gap herself, hiding for reasons unknown, before vanishing into thin air. And then there were those who leaned into something darker, that the store itself wasn't just a building, but a kind of trap, a place where reality seemed to twist, where people could disappear and leave behind only echoes. The family's despair. For the family, the discovery was a fresh wound. Her mother said, "It's like they gave me hope and ripped it away in the same breath. Now I know she was there. But I don't know where she is. And I don't know if she suffered." Her words were gutting. Because for the first time, the family wasn't asking whether she vanished on her own. They knew someone, or something, had done this. The only question left was who, or what. The shift in the case. Investigators thought they had been chasing a person. A kidnapper. A stalker. Someone who had targeted her specifically. But now, standing in that hidden room, staring at the words on the walls, even the most seasoned detectives admitted this wasn't like anything they'd ever seen before. The case was no longer just a disappearance. It was beginning to feel like a story out of urban legend, a mystery too bizarre to belong to the real world. And as the store sat empty, locked up and abandoned, one thing became terrifyingly clear. The grocery clerk wasn't the only person who had reason to fear aisle 3. The haunting evidence. When the grocery store finally closed its doors, most people in town were relieved. No more eerie shopping trips. No more whispered rumors about aisle 3. But for investigators, closing the store wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of something far more unsettling. Because shutting down the building gave them the freedom to do something they hadn't done before, take their time, comb through every inch, and investigate without customers or corporate lawyers breathing down their necks. And what they found inside only deepened the nightmare. The security footage. One of the first things detectives did was pull all of the old surveillance tapes. For months, the store had been running security cameras 24/7, but investigators had only been able to check the hours surrounding the night she vanished. Now, with no time restrictions, they went back further. That's when they noticed something strange. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, the same glitch appeared on the footage, always in aisle 3, always at around 9:17 p.m. The camera would flicker, distort, and then freeze for exactly 3 seconds. Afterward, everything would return to normal. But the night she disappeared, the glitch didn't last 3 seconds. It lasted 9. And when the video resumed, she was gone. The audio disturbance. Even stranger, one of the cameras in the back storage area had a built-in microphone. Most of the time, it captured nothing but the hum of freezers and the shuffle of boxes. But on the night of her disappearance, just before the glitch in aisle 3, the microphone picked up something else. A voice. At first, it sounded like static. But when the audio was enhanced, the distortion gave way to a faint whisper. Investigators couldn't make out most of it, but one phrase was chillingly clear. "She's not supposed to be here." The store's history. Spooked by the new evidence, detectives dug deeper into the building's past. They discovered that the grocery store wasn't the first business to occupy that land. Years earlier, the property had been home to a small factory. The factory closed down abruptly after multiple worker disappearances, cases that, at the time, were chalked up to runaways and never solved. And before the factory, records suggested the land had been part of a settlement with its own history of vanishings. Generations of disappearances, all tied to the same patch of ground, like the earth itself was swallowing people whole. The paranormal divide. For the investigators, this was the breaking point. Half the team believed they were chasing a human suspect, someone who had used the hidden room to stage an abduction, someone clever enough to cover their tracks. The other half whispered a different theory, that something about the store, or the land it stood on, was cursed. That the glitching cameras, the whisper on the tape, the strange room with the writing on the walls, these weren't the works of a person. They were signs of something else. The family's breaking point. The clerk's family was torn apart by the revelations. Her mother refused to believe in curses or glitches. She wanted answers grounded in reality. But her younger brother, after hearing the tape, swore that what had taken her wasn't human. He told reporters, "If you hear that voice once, you'll never forget it. I don't think we're going to find her alive. I think something took her." His words sent shivers through the community, fueling the growing belief that the store wasn't just unlucky, it was dangerous. The final sweep. Determined to put the rumors to rest, police organized one final sweep of the building. They brought in ground-penetrating radar to scan the floors and walls, looking for hidden chambers or burial sites. The results stunned them. In multiple spots throughout the building, including directly under aisle 3, the radar showed voids. Empty spaces beneath the concrete that shouldn't have existed. Some were narrow, like tunnels. Others were wide, like caverns. When asked if they planned to dig, one investigator simply shook his head and muttered, "We don't have the equipment for this. And even if we did, I'm not sure I'd want to know what's down there." The terrifying implication. At this point, the case was no longer just about a missing grocery clerk. It was about a building that seemed alive, a place where the laws of nature bent and reality slipped. And yet, despite the evidence, the glitching cameras, the whispers on the tape, the underground voids, there was still no body. No trace of her beyond that scrap of fabric. The case, officially, remained unsolved. But the people who had seen the footage, who had stood in the storage room staring at the walls covered in warnings, who had listened to the whispering voice, they were convinced of one thing. She hadn't just disappeared. She had been taken. We'll uncover how this story ends, not with answers, but with a haunting conclusion that leaves investigators, the family, and the town forever changed. The final echo. Months turned into years. The grocery store, once bustling with life, now sat in silence. Its windows were boarded up, its parking lot cracked with weeds. To anyone passing by, it looked like nothing more than another failed business. But for the people in town, the abandoned store wasn't forgotten. It was feared. No one went near it. Kids dared each other to run up and touch the locked doors, but none stayed long. Some claimed they saw shadows moving inside. Others swore they heard faint beeping sounds, like checkout scanners still running in the dark. But for one family, the store wasn't just a place to be feared. It was a wound that never healed. The family's silence. The clerk's mother stopped giving interviews. She had poured her heart out for years, begging for answers, and all it brought her was more pain. Her father grew distant, unable to bear the weight of hope and despair colliding every day. Her brother, once outspoken, now avoided the subject entirely. It wasn't that they had stopped caring. It was that the case had stolen too much from them already, their daughter, their sister, their peace of mind. In the end, silence was the only thing they had left. The case file. Officially, the disappearance remains unsolved. The file sits in cold storage, thousands of pages long, filled with interviews, evidence logs, photographs of aisle 3, and endless theories. Detectives who work the case still bring it up from time to time. Not in meetings, not in reports, but in hushed conversations, when they think no one is listening. They all agree on one thing: it's the case that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. The last recording. But there's one detail the public doesn't know. Months after the store closed, one of the investigators went back alone. He set up a camera in aisle 3, determined to capture evidence of the glitch for himself. For hours, nothing happened. Just silence, dust, and darkness. And then, at exactly 9:17 p.m., the glitch appeared. The footage froze, distorted, then cleared. And when it did, the investigator swore he saw something in the reflection of the glass freezer doors. A young woman, wearing a grocery store uniform. Her face pale, her eyes wide. She looked straight into the camera. And then she was gone. The video was never released to the public. But the officer who reviewed it resigned shortly after. When asked why, all he said was, "She's still in there." The legend. Today, the story of the missing grocery clerk lives on. Some people whisper that she's trapped beneath the store, in the tunnels no one dares to dig. Others believe the land itself claimed her, like it had claimed so many before. But the most chilling theory is also the simplest, that she's still working her shift, caught in some place between life and death, scanning groceries that no one else can see. And every night, at exactly 9:17 p.m., the glitch is her only way of reaching out. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just another disappearance. It's a story that defies reason, a story that lingers in your mind long after the last word. But here's the thing, there are so many more cases like this. Stories of vanishings, mysteries, and chilling encounters that have never been solved. If you want to hear them, if you want to step into the dark corners of reality where the impossible becomes possible, then make sure you hit the subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Because while this story may be over, the next one might be even stranger. And trust me, you'll want to be here when I tell it.